What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this past Friday we got the much anticipated sequel to Dead Island, appropriately named Dead Island 2. And since I'm recording this video, I've obviously played it and I want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. Like I mentioned before, this sequel was much anticipated. I think it was first announced in 2014, and it's been in production hell ever since. It's jumped a few different studios, and I, like many people my age, played the original Dead Island when it was first released. I also played the expansion or pseudo sequel, Dead Island Riptide, when it was first released as well. And both of those games had the distinct advantage of being released at the height of the zombie genre's popularity. I'm a big fan of the genre. I literally have a George Romero tattoo on my leg, so I'm obviously a fan of the genre, and I enjoyed both of those games. Riptide, to a lesser extent, I think that game kind of wore out its welcome pretty quickly, but I was pretty excited for this game. Like I said, I am a fan of the genre, and I was very curious to see if Dead Island 2 was going to be able to breathe new life into this oversaturated genre, or did it kind of miss its window because it took so long for it to come out. Like I said earlier, Dead Island 2 was released this past Friday, April 21st. It was developed by Dambuster Studios and published by Deep Silver. It was released on PS4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, and PC, so basically everything but Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, the PC version of this game is an Epic Store exclusive. The last time I checked, it wasn't even listed on Steam, so it may not even be coming out for Steam. I personally played it on my PS5. Dead Island 2 is set in LA and San Francisco, which, side note, neither one of those are islands, but I digress. It takes place 10 years after the original games. California is in full quarantine due to a new and stronger zombie outbreak. In the spirit of true transparency, I'm not going to title this video as my Dead Island 2 review. I'm just gonna kind of give you my first impressions, because if you've watched any of my short content recently, you know I just got back from my anniversary trip to Jamaica, and if you're a gaming adult like myself, you know when you've been gone for a while, you have a lot of adulting to get caught up on. I also had my nephew's 9-year-old birthday party a couple of days ago, so therefore, between those two things, I didn't get to play this game as much as I wanted to. That being said, I have played this between like 13 to 15 hours. I've done some side content. According to the game, I only have like a handful of story missions left. So I have played a big chunk of this game. I really doubt that my opinions about this game are going to really change in the last few hours that I play this game, but I've had that experience before, most recently with a game like Scorn that I reviewed last year. I was really getting pretty tired of that game and I was ready to rip it a new one, but then the last hour was really, really cool. I kind of changed my mind a little bit about that game. So I don't want to call this my official review because I don't want to feel like I'm being dishonest, because I technically haven't beaten the game. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into my thoughts. And like I said in the intro, I was very curious to see if Dead Island 2, because it took so long for it to come out, if it missed its window to be relevant. Whether it's in the movies, TV, or in this case, video games, the zombie genre has been oversaturated in the last 10 years. For better or for worse, Dead Island 2 doesn't try or even really want to reinvent the wheel of the genre. However, that means it left a lot of meat on the bone in pretty much every aspect of the game. Dead Island 2 is not an open world, which I know is going to upset some people. Me personally, I'm starting to get open world fatigue. We're getting a lot of games that come out that feel just very generic open world. You're kind of doing the same things over and over again. Not every game has to be open world. The level design in Dead Island 2 definitely reminds me of a game like The Last of Us Part 2, where it's technically not an open world. The mission that you're on is very linear. However, the area that you're in is pretty big and there's a lot to explore. I do like the side mission stuff in Dead Island 2, especially when you get to save other survivors. I think it's really cool that if you do save them, they will be added to your group later. I just feel like that gives it a level of importance. And a lot of other games where you do these side missions, it doesn't really matter. In Dead Island 2, it does kind of matter. And I'm gonna do a deeper dive into the environment later, but like I said, I really wanted to explore, and which is good because the game definitely wants you to explore, but it's not an open world game for the simple sake of being an open world game. And as you might imagine with a game like this, the story leaves a lot to be desired. If you are worried about not playing the first game or Riptide, rest easy, it does not matter. Dead Island 2 does kind of handcuff itself a bit in the story department by allowing you to choose different characters, which they call slayers. You have your choice of 6 different slayers who all have different abilities and stats. Call me a basic bitch if you want, but I chose Jacob, who is on the cover art, but also because I tend to gravitate towards a character with the balanced stats, especially on my first playthrough. I'll kind of mid-max on future replays once I know how I play the game. A quick note that once you choose your Slayer, you are locked in with that choice the entire game, so definitely choose wisely. Now, of course, since I haven't beaten this game, I haven't had a chance to replay it yet to test out this theory, but the feeling I've gotten so far is the story is very generic. They play it very safe because they don't know what character you picked, so they kind of have to be cut and paste with a lot of aspects to this story. And while the story, whether it's a movie, TV show, or in this case, video game, is usually make it or break it for me, I really want to care about the story, or I really want to care about the characters. With Dead Island 2, I don't want to criticize the lack of story that much because, to be honest with you, again, I've played the original game and Riptide, and I liked both of those games, Riptide to a lesser extent, but I don't really remember what happens with those stories because if you're playing a game like this, you're probably not playing it for the story. You are playing this game for its zombie slaying gore, and Dead Island 2 has that in spades. I'm a big horror fan. I watch a lot of horror movies. Therefore, I don't get fazed by blood and guts very often, but even I was surprised at how gory this game was. You can cut limbs off, you can set zombies on fire, you can melt their skin with acid. Shit gets crazy. That being said, hacking away on zombies does get very repetitive very quickly, and unfortunately, Dead Island 2 does the thing that I have criticized recently with games like High on Life and Atomic Heart, where instead of fixing the repetitive gameplay, they just have the character make a joke about it. And side note, this game is pretty funny. It does have a very cool sense of humor. Jacob has a very fun personality. That being said, just because you can make a joke about the repetitive gameplay doesn't actually fix it. It's like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. Now, there is dodging and blocking. There's also a cool drop kick move, which I missed a lot. I embarrassed myself with that drop kick a lot while playing this game. And if you're able to connect, unlike myself, you can kind of knock down zombies or stagger them, which will sometimes allow you to do these really cool finisher moves. But outside of that, you're gonna mostly just be hacking and slashing your way through hordes of zombies. And like I've mentioned earlier, Dead Island 2 feels like in many aspects of the game only scratched the surface of how cool it could have been, and that's especially true with its skill tree. And to even call this system a skill tree is pretty generous because it's very bare bones. Basically, you have these Slayer cards, which, side note, the design of the Slayer cards are pretty cool. I do want to give it credit there. But essentially, there's just these cards that you get that unlock new abilities or upgrade your character. And there's really not a whole lot of depth through it outside of that. And as you might expect, especially if you played the first game or you've seen some promo material, there are workbenches in Dead Island 2 where you can repair and mod your weapons. You can get some really badass weapons in this game, which come in very handy, because especially early on in this game, I was surprised at how quickly I got overwhelmed with the amount of zombies. You can bite off way more than you can chew, pun intended, very quickly in this game. But once you get the trick of this game, it becomes a lot easier. There are so many zombies and the hordes get so big because the game wants you to use the environment to your advantage. There are a lot of car batteries and gasoline tanks, and there's water leaking everywhere in this game because they want you to use the environment to have fun and to set up all these traps. And once you get the hang of it, it makes this game really, really fun and a lot easier. And the environment of Dead Island 2 is easily my favorite part of this game so far. I hate to use this cliche, but it applies really well for Dead Island 2, so here we go. The environment is like its own character in the game. I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. If it wasn't for how much personality the developers crammed into the environment, I would have gotten bored with Dead Island 2 very quickly. I said this earlier, but they added so much character to the surroundings that every new area felt so unique. I'm a big movie buff, so I really enjoyed fighting zombies through a movie set. There's also a side mission where you get to save a survivor in that same movie set, so you get to revisit that, which I appreciated. There's also a content creator house that you get to explore, which is also very fun. So while I wasn't super impressed with the overall plot of Dead Island 2 and the character work, the environment does such a great job of kind of telling its own story. They have a very cynical view of Hollywood, and they have a very dark sense of humor of the LA culture, that if you're paying attention, there's also kind of like this side story that you can kind of unlock if you're paying attention to the environment. And it certainly didn't hurt the environment that this game looks really, really good on PlayStation 5. It runs very smooth. I will say that in the 15-ish hours that I played, I only had 2 weird glitchy moments, which in a game like this where you're overwhelmed with a lot of zombies and there's a ton of stuff in the environment, I was really impressed that I only saw 2 things that I thought were kind of glitchy. And while I won't be giving Dead Island 2 an official star rating, because technically I haven't beaten it and this video is just my first impressions, I will say that I have really enjoyed my time with this game. That being said, I would suggest waiting a few months. I mean, basically at this point, you've already waited 10 years. What's a few more months to see if you can't get this game on sale? Because there isn't a ton of depth to the story. There is a few nitpicks that I've had with the skill tree and so on and so forth that I don't love that I paid full price for this game. So if you can get it on sale, that would be great. But if you're like me and you like games like this where you can kind of just shut off your brain, and in this case, just hack and slash through zombies, Dead Island 2 is a very good game. But of course, those are just my thoughts on Dead Island 2. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below, especially if you've played the original game and or Riptide. I'd love to hear what you thought of Dead Island 2. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, you've made it this far, so you probably liked it. Definitely smash that like button, as the kids say. Consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you get notified every time I post a video. I post weekly gaming related content, so if you like that type of content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy, and we were just talking and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?